I don't know about you, but there is something oddly nostalgic about the month of November. Halloween has just passed, we're approaching Thanksgiving, and Christmas is practically knocking at the door. But there's one date in November that echoes louder than the rest: the unforgettable anniversary of JFK's assassination. You might be thinking to yourself, well, it wasn't the food that killed him, but when you take a look at what his last meal was, that cholesterol would have definitely caught up to him at some point. I don't want to reveal just yet what his last meal was. First, let me give you a bit of a backstory. We know a lot of facts about John F. Kennedy's last day, so let me paint you a picture. Imagine this. It's a crisp fall morning in Fort Worth, Texas. It's a windy and rainy day. Leaves are falling as the sun rises. It was a day just like any other, until it wasn't. The president wakes up in his room 8:50 at the Texas Hotel, which is now Hilton Fort Worth. He calls up his valet and gives him his breakfast order. A man named Marvin Love gets the president's order from his valet, and it goes like this. He wanted 5-minute egg boiled, crisp bacon, orange juice fresh, coffee with hot milk. He preferred hot milk instead of cream, toast with butter on the side, and he particularly wanted orange marmalade. I would bet that Marvin let out a big sigh of relief once he heard that simple order. Thank God he's not one of those "I only eat caviar for breakfast" types of people. We can't be certain that Marvin Love had these kinds of assumptions about the president's order, but let's be honest. You would think the president would want something complex, something classy, something regular people could just dream of having for breakfast. But no, his breakfast was pretty simple and standard. But hold up, like in life, nothing is ever that simple. There was a specific recipe that Jacqueline Kennedy, JFK's wife, wrote that had to be followed for a perfect presidential breakfast. Before I reveal the big secret recipe, here's a little fun fact for you. Jackie's cookbook was written in French since she was a big Francophile. Why is this important? Well, I guess it's not that important for the sake of the story, but it just seemed like a fun fact you should know. Now let's get back to the recipe. Next to a 5-minute boiled egg, there had to be also crisp oven-broiled bacon, orange juice, Pepperidge white toast, coffee, marmalade. In her cookbook, she underlined the word broiled. She wrote down these instructions for their private chef, Tanya Herbst, with a specific note, "Mr. K cannot eat anything fried." I guess Mr. President was taking care of his health at least a little bit. But broiling isn't an easy thing to do, especially if you're a beginner in the kitchen. So, if you're new to this cooking thing, I would dare to go a bit off track in this part of the breakfast preparation. Just fry some bacon. It won't hurt you. The president won't mind. If you decide to take the easy route, which, again, no one would blame you if you did, this is how you'll get that perfectly fried bacon. You don't need any oil, fat, or butter. I know that'll be a challenge for some people, but you want to watch that cholesterol. Just put the bacon strips into a pan and allow them to let out their juices. Oh, that smell of freshly fried bacon. It makes your mouth water from just thinking about it. Once they start sizzling and begin to turn into that golden brown color, flip them. Let them fry for no more than a minute, and voila! You've got yourself a perfectly fried bacon. This may be a bit messier than broiling, but it will save you the trouble. But if you're a brave cookie, here's how to broil some bacon. First, set the oven rack to the top position and turn the broiler on high. Then line a pan with some baking foil. This just makes the cleaning part so much easier, since the bacon won't stick to the pan and you won't be elbows deep in dish soap. You can thank me later. Now put 7 or 8 strips of bacon on the pan, put the pan in the oven, and broil away, but for no more than 3 minutes. You don't want to carbonize those strips. After 3 minutes, flip the bacon strips, and in the oven they go for another 3 minutes. You need to be careful with this part because they can burn like wildfire in a matter of seconds. If you don't like greasy fingers, place your broiled bacon on some paper towels to soak up that grease. Moving on to the bread. Jackie Kennedy said that the bread must be Pepperidge Farm bread that is cut pretty thick. Now, personally, I think bread is bread. So anything you get for this part is perfectly fine. Get your favorite bread, toast it, and there you have it. Serve it with butter and marmalade. As for the beverages, the president specifically ordered freshly squeezed orange juice and freshly brewed coffee with milk warmed on a stove instead of cream. No day-old coffee for Mr. President. You can experiment with this part. Switch the orange juice with lemon, or even add some lime. And ginger. This is a little secret recipe of mine, but shh, don't tell anyone. Play around with the ingredients. That's what makes cooking fun. The last, but certainly not least part of this breakfast preparation is the eggs. I hate the idea of a watery egg, but here goes nothing. To already simmering water, carefully, I mean really carefully, add some eggs and boil for exactly 5 minutes. That is what Marvin Love said when he was specifying how President Kennedy liked his breakfast eggs. While we wait for those eggs to boil, let me give you more details on how that seemingly normal day went. So, why was President Kennedy in Texas on that November day in 1963? If you guessed for politics, you would be correct. Ding, ding, ding. You won the prize. The prize being, well, good critical thinking skills, I guess? Yes, he was there for politics. You see, just a few years back in 1960, he had barely won the election in Texas, and in the next few years, he grew less and less popular there. The reason for this fallout with the people of Texas was mainly his stance on civil rights. He was aware that the feud among the party leaders could jeopardize his campaign and his chances of carrying the state in 1964. One of his goals for this trip was to bring Democrats together. He had been warned by multiple people not to travel to Dallas since no other city was as hostile to the president. It had a reputation for not being very safe and visitor-friendly. Just a few months earlier, an ambassador to the UN, Adlai Stevenson, visited Dallas, and it wasn't a very nice and warm welcome that he received. There was a small group of extremists who would contribute to the political tensions. The next day, the newspapers were writing about several incidents that happened, and it was safe to say that Dallas was, in fact, not safe. But Mr. Kennedy was a stubborn man, to say the least. Even after being warned about the incidents in Dallas by his own man, he still wanted to visit. He was persistent, and he stated that it was extremely important to mend the relations in Dallas for the upcoming re-election in 1964. What made this trip different from his other trips was the fact that his wife Jackie Kennedy joined him. She rarely accompanied him on work trips, particularly in the months following the loss of their newborn son Patrick in August of that year. But I digress. Let's get to the main part of the story. After having breakfast in his room, John F. Kennedy came down to have a formal breakfast held by the Chamber of Commerce. There's actual footage of this whole ordeal happening. In that footage, the narrator says what the president's plans were for that day, and here the butterfly effect can be seen in its full force. Allow me to explain. Ooh, I love being mysterious. So the president was to leave the premises in an open car, a convertible. But since it had been raining, like I said in the beginning, and the rain didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon, the top was most certainly going to be up. And imagine that. How would history as we know it today be changed if only that top had stayed up? There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the perfect example of the butterfly effect. As you've understood by now, the rain had stopped. JFK, as I said before, was a stubborn man. He broke security rules, going into crowds of people and making it harder for the Secret Service men to keep him safe. And that's what he did upon arriving at the Texas hotel. You never know, and you never assume anything bad is going to happen. You just live ignorantly thinking that nothing bad will ever happen to you. That stuff only happens in movies or to other people. It will never be me, until it is you. You might be wondering, why am I making this melancholy and a bit depressing remark? Well, did you know that the last president to be assassinated before JFK was William McKinley in 1901? Yes, on September 6, 1901, President William McKinley was assassinated due to not following security rules. He was shot by Leon Czolgosz, a Polish-American laborer and anarchist. I mean, you truly never think anything will be different than usual until something different does happen. Okay, so where were we? Yes. At 09:10 in the morning, President John F. Kennedy and his entourage went into the Crystal Ballroom. But there was someone missing. Where is Jacqueline Kennedy? At the time, Jackie was up in her room with no intention of getting down, but no man wants to be by himself at an occasion of this sort. Having an empty space by him, where his wife was supposed to be, was definitely not a good look. Mrs. Kennedy was actually getting ready to leave the hotel when she was summoned by the Secret Service men. A few minutes later, Jacqueline Kennedy came down looking stunning and the crowd went wild. Even though the president's reputation in these parts wasn't at its highest, Jackie's definitely wasn't looking so bad. The president then gave a speech followed by something that would be called the Hat Anecdote in the future. If you haven't heard of this, let me put you in the loop. I am full of fun facts today. You know how when people dress up as JFK and his wife, for Halloween, every JFK costume comes with a hat? But he wasn't wearing a hat when he was assassinated. Well, here's why. Raymond Buck, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, presented John F. Kennedy with a Peters Brothers hat. If you didn't know, President Kennedy wasn't one for wearing hats. He said something about an ill-timed photo making him look like a buffoon wearing a silly hat. Apparently, something like that had happened before, like Calvin Coolidge wearing a Native American headpiece 40 years prior, or Michael Dukakis in 1988 with that helmet photo. For our younger viewers who may not know about this little quirk in our history, allow me to explain. Again, sorry for the digression. I promise I will get to the main part soon. In the summer of 1988, Michael Dukakis was running towards becoming the 41st President of the United States. He was 17 points ahead in this run for the presidency against his opponent George Bush. And then, he took the embarrassing photo in a battle tank, wearing a helmet. I mean, of course he didn't lose that election just because of the photo. But all these years later, his presidential candidacy is remembered by that photo shoot in the M1 Abrams military battle tank. And a lot of people do believe it caused him to, well, tank. No pun intended. Okay, now getting back to the story. Nevertheless, Raymond Buck made a joke about not wanting Mr. Kennedy to leave Fort Worth without some protection from the rain. But Mr. President was adamant, and he didn't try on the hat. He did promise, though, that he would try the hat on once Mr. Buck comes to visit him in the White House. So JFK and his wife headed to their Dallas flight. They left the hotel and went by motorcade to Carswell Air Force Base for their 13-minute-long flight to Dallas. But before, the Kennedys arrived at Love Field and were going to meet Texas Governor John Connally and his wife for lunch. Wow, those people could eat. By this time, it had already stopped raining, so there was no other reason, except for security, that the car roof needed to be up. The Secret Service urged the president to put the roof up, but he didn't want anything to be between him and the people. Now, in today's day and age, this simply wouldn't fly. What do you mean, no, I won't put the roof up? Well, too bad for you, Mr. President. The roof is going up whether you like it or not. I mean, they are there to keep him safe. You wouldn't see a president today do such a thing. No, with these gun laws? Nah. But oh well, it was the 60s, and I guess an assassination wasn't that big of a concern. Spoiler alert, it should have been. The motorcade began its drive. They were driving for 10 miles through the streets of Dallas, which were packed with people, trying to catch just one glimpse of the president and his beloved wife. As they were leaving downtown Dallas, the high-risk part of town, it seemed as though the most dangerous part of the drive was over. They then turned onto Houston Street, and the crowds were cheering from the top of their lungs. The governor's wife, Nellie Connally, said to the president, "You cannot say that Dallas doesn't love you," to which he replied, "No, you certainly can't." Well, somebody in Dallas obviously didn't love him, and in a matter of seconds, everything changed. 3 loud gunshots were fired from the last building on the route from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository on Elm Street. The president was shot in his neck and head, and the governor was shot in his back. The car sped off to Parkland Memorial Hospital, but not much could be done for Mr. President. At 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead, and America lost its most beloved president. Less than an hour earlier, the police had arrested Lee Harvey Oswald. He was a recently hired employee at the Texas School Book Depository. He was guilty of the assassination of President JFK. We won't be delving into details of the assassination itself and its aftermath. but we are here to give you some more interesting food-related information. When police swarmed the building where Lee Harvey Oswald was, they found the leftovers of some fried chicken and an empty Coke bottle. I guess that was his last meal before he decided to change world history. But what's even more haunting is an empty place at the Dallas Trademark Luncheon, where President Kennedy was headed with his wife and the governor. That November 22, 1963, was definitely a date that would change the course of American history. If things had gone just slightly differently, how would the world as we know it today look? If the car roof was up, if the party left a bit earlier, or if they had been running late? We will never know, and we can only imagine. Now, if you were following our recipe, those eggs should be done by now. But listen up, they aren't for the faint of heart. Not everyone can eat soft-boiled eggs. So keep that in mind if you decide to try making the president's last meal. If you're like me, and by that I mean, you're a normal human being who doesn't like watery eggs, you can hard-boil them. And I can dare to say that the whole breakfast experience will be even better. Add some salt and pepper or any seasoning of your choice and dig in. Breakfast is served with a shot of a history lesson on the side. One thing is for sure, the president knew which food was going to keep him fed all day long. Eggs, bacon, and toast. That right there is the perfect recipe for a full stomach. But even though his meal choices were simple, we definitely can't say the same about the president's life choices. He wanted to make our world a better place, and for that, he suffered the worst fate of all. But that is life for you. Now that your home smells like eggs, bacon, and freshly brewed coffee, I urge you to think to yourself, what would you want your last meal to be? And if this video made you learn something new about our country's history or about cooking, like, subscribe, and keep those memories alive with us.